Good afternoon, everybody. I think we'll go ahead and call our Paducah Independent School District special meeting of the Board of Education to order. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Dr. Okoji?
Here.
Ms. Hancock?
Here.
Ms. Howard?
Here.
Dr. Hudson?
Here.
Dr. LeBoon?
Here. Have we established a quorum?
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve today's agenda?
I so move.
Move from Dr. Okoji,
I'll second.
second from Mary Hunter Hancock. Are there any questions from the board? Call the roll, please.
Dr. Okoji?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. LeBoon?
Yes. If everyone would please rise. Dr. Shively, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have one item on the agenda for this afternoon, and that's item 6.0. It's discussion and possible action. This would involve changes to the 2021 calendar revisions and options to return to in-person learning at school. And I think to start, before there's any questions from the board, I think Dr. Shively has information from recent surveys and some other local data to review with us.
Absolutely. Good afternoon.
Good
I'm
afternoon.
going to move here to the center. I think we can see the PowerPoint with those of us that are tuning in virtually, and I'm going to try to get close to the microphone. So wanted to start out of where we're at and how we kind of got here. And so if you look at the February 15th board meeting, we had on the agenda discussion and possible action on school calendar. Obviously, we're back here today because there was an action taken and there was information that was requested, which was, I think, a great step into surveying not only our faculty and staff, but our parents, and getting their input in words throughout the survey, which we'll get to here in a second. Since the February 15th board meeting, I think it was the 17th or early on the 18th, the survey went out. On the February 21st, Governor Beshear put out an additional executive order. And so in that executive order, he recommended all school districts offer or expand, and interestingly enough, that was public and private, offer or expand some form of in-person instruction opportunities beginning March 1st, 2021, or 7 days after the district personnel have received their second vaccination. And so if you remember back to when we talked about this conversation on the 15th, we were asking, could we go more days than 2? Could we go 4? And my recommendation it was that I didn't feel comfortable until 7 days after the second vaccination, which was yesterday. And you normally don't start that in the middle of the week. You would start that on a Monday. And so, 7 days from yesterday would be next Wednesday. I apologize for that. And so with that, in the executive order, he also outlined a couple of other things that I wanted to touch on that we're already doing. Number one was wear face mask. That has been a non-negotiable. Our kids have done a tremendous job. Our students have done a tremendous job of meeting that expectation throughout the year, so I'd like to thank them for that. Density reduction, which when we had the executive order coming out of Christmas, it was to be the most restrictive hybrid you could possibly be. And for us, that was 2 days a week for our children, and for the flu group, 2 days for tornado. I will tell you, as we look at bringing more children back, potentially, the density would increase with that, but I think there's steps and things that we can think through and put in place to ensure we're getting maximum distance between our children. The third, maybe the fourth bullet there, evaluate school buildings ventilation systems was part of that executive order. And so I really want to take you back to August of 2020. And so in August of 2020, we were one of the first school districts to talk to our engineering group and say, what do we have to do to maximize the air quality in our buildings? And so we got recommendations from Backus Oliver with Bacon Farmer Workman relative to starting bringing in fresh air 2 hours before anybody gets to the building, continue to bring fresh air throughout the day, and then run that fresh air in and keep our systems going for 2 hours after that. And so we have been doing that. Now we've had some, just like every year, we have had some issues with our HVAC systems. We have been addressing those, and I can talk through those if there's questions. I know there's been a few questions with that in the survey data that we got. The next part was provide meaningful virtual options. And so to me, the part there is meaningful, and I want to brag on our faculty and staff. Since we started in August, we were not committed to putting children on a learning platform across the district. We were committed to ensuring they had access to our high-level instruction delivered by teachers within the buildings. And so that's morphed a little bit throughout the year. Our elementary, for 2 of our buildings, have a dedicated virtual teacher, K through 4 in both of those. One of them has K through 5. Another building has 1 grade level elementary-wise that has that. In middle school and high school, we've got our teachers that are teaching class. They're either doing that live or they're meeting with students after hours with that. And so I'd like to thank them for that, and that has been as similar as we can possibly make that to what's going on at school. And then also regularly review the incident rate map, which is put out by the state, which we do that. And we actually do a little bit more than that I'll share with you each week on our discussions about what's happening in Paducah and McCracken County. Here is the first incident rate map I will show you. This is yesterday. And so this is in your PowerPoint. I'm going to step a little bit closer because I can't see from back there. But the incident rate for McCracken County is 12.2, I gotta get glasses, which we're just a little bit above hovering the yellow mark there. With that, which is the community spread, green is on track, orange is accelerated, and red is critical. In talking with Lindsay Cunningham for the Purchase Area Health Department today, I expect us to be potentially right around 10 this afternoon. I think it's about 4 o'clock when this comes out, so I think we're going to be down just a slight bit more than that from our conversation earlier today. Just to give you a historical perspective, and I apologize, we just got this right before the slides, right before the meeting starts. I'll walk you back, and I can't read that from back there again. But if you go to October 31st, just to give you an idea, we were at 37.1 incident rate per 100,000 in McCracken County. If you go to November 13th, we were at, and let me walk back here, easier to see the screen, 68.3. On December the 12th, about a month later, we were 66.8. As you can see, most of the state was red there. McCracken County on January the 11th is 54.6. This is when the executive order was in session and we had to be the most restrictive hybrid at this point going forward if you're in a red county. You fast forward to February 9th and we were 30.4. So 25 is the cut there, so we're a little bit above the orange. And then if you get to February 22nd, we were down to 11.1. So that would have been, I guess, on Monday. And then February 23rd, we were 10.5. So we've been hovering right above the yellow this week relative to our incident rate map. And so those are good signs relative to the community spread that our state looks at. With that, this is a graph that we've kept up with each week. We've either communicated directly or informally between Dr. LeBoon as infectious disease control doctor, the Purchase Area Health Department. We have a couple other neighboring districts that look at this. And so what this is the active cases for McCracken County is outlined in blue on that graph, which you can see the line there, and you can see it's dipping down far over here on the right now relative to where we're at now. The what I believe you will see is orange is the Region 1 each Thursday, the number of active cases. And then if you look at the gray line, that's Region 1 plus Region 2, which is the Lyon County area, Crittenden County area this way. And so there was 1 week with snow, there wasn't any Region 2 data. But on this very specifically, you can see the trend spiked, what you saw in the incident rate map, and you see it's come down, it's gone back up a little bit, and now we're continuing on the downslope for the last month, if not month and a half. Another thing that we look at locally is the percent positive rate between Mercy Health and Lourdes, or not in Lourdes, Mercy Health Lourdes, and Baptist Health. And so they've been very generous. Each week is letting us know the number of people tested for COVID and the number of positives. So again, that's on each Thursday. We've been doing this since July 17th. And so here's the trend line of what we've seen Since July 17th, that we've been talking to Dr. Boone, the First Health Department, and a couple other districts, and communicate what's going on there. Our last Thursday, our percent positive rate, this doesn't encompass the whole community because there's other areas that test, but we know those are the two biggest testing sites we have, was 5.7. I believe if you look back, that's the lowest it's been since early to mid-October last year. And so again, that's another good trend relative to what our data is doing here locally that we've been marking each Thursday since July. With that, we put that parent survey out last week and collected, this is the data through last night at about 6 o'clock. And I've gotten the schools broken out, but I'll look at it overall. So we have about 1,082 that are in favor of a 4-day week responses, 248 that would not be. So the total survey result of 1,330, which was ultimately about a 81.5%. Yes, we would like to go to school more than 2 days a week. And I see this for me as, at least the way I look at this is a risk factor. And it's about 47 or 46, excuse me, % of our student body. That's a loose approximation. Sometimes families might have 2 survey results in there for, 2 guardians, 2 parents. A couple of things that are on the bottom here, so I hope you can see that in virtual land, but I'll read it to you. Out of the 1,068 responses to yes, attending 2 days a week, 92% wanted to move to 4. So if you're currently, you answered the survey, you're currently going to 2 days a week, 92% wanted to move that from 2 to 4. 8% obviously asked to stay at 2 days a week. And then we had 262 responses for families or parents or guardians that are not attending school right now, and 165 of those, or 63%, were committed to a virtual model going forward, where the other 97 or 37%, to me, looks like that could be our potential waiting list from the results on the survey that would like to come back 4 days a week. So on our employee survey data, and again, this is an overall, and I did want to look at the teachers and share that with you too. Obviously, all of our employees are working with children, but our teachers are in charge of their learning. And so I was very pleased personally with what we looked at is about a 63.7% response rate, even more pleased when we get to the teachers. Again, I hope our community knows our employees want to work with children.
You said 63% response rate. Wasn't it a 90% response rate? 63% wanted to come back 4 days a week, or did I as I was reading through the data before?
Yes, I apologize. So a response rate, we've got 460 full-time employees, and 293 responded out of the 460. So the response rate is 63.7%. If you look at our teachers versus, and then add in our classified, which is instructional assistants, our secretary, transportation custodians, and then add in office staff, which has been admin, frisky, counselors. When you add that together, we had 293 total responses across our district, and 63% of those total responses from the employees that answered this, the full-time employees that answered this, said yes, they would like to come back 4 days a week with children. I do not think the other percent represents those that don't want children in the building. I think that's a risk factor that people are thinking through relative to their personal self. And so, again, I do not see this as our employees saying they don't want to work with children because they're already working with children 4 days a week. I think it has a personal thought process and risk tolerance part to that. The teacher side of this, which is the next slide, is, and just to talk through this overall, I was extremely excited. And if you go to the bottom on the far right, we're looking at 91% response rate from our teachers, which was much, much better than anticipated and was excited to see. And you're seeing a very similar number there. Overall, 63.1% said, yes, we would like to see each child at least 4 days a week with that. Again, that doesn't, to me, mean our teachers don't want to work with children, because that's not the case. And I've heard that over and over and over as you read through the surveys, and I know you all have, and I'll talk about that in a second. But as we read through the surveys, I think there is the risk thought process that comes into play in everybody's individual life. But looking at parent surveys, it was 4 to 1 wanting to have children in the building 2 days a week, and here we're almost 2 out of 3 in our employee and teacher surveys that are saying yes, we feel comfortable going 4 days a week. This is, this as a board, but I want our community to know this, and I want our employees to know this, is that we had an open response item on the parent survey. We had an open box for our employee survey. And so on Monday at 2 o'clock, we organized those and made sure you had a copy of those as board members to start reviewing what had come through, and there was a significant number of pages of those. And then last night at 6 o'clock, I had to have a little bit of a cutoff, so at 6 o'clock, I pulled everything that wasn't there Monday at 2 o'clock, and I emailed that to you all so that you would have that last night and today to look through. And so in going through that, is for me reading through that, and I think for you all too, going through that was important to understand what thoughts were relative to for or against, and also the opportunity to think through conversations that we need to have going forward, or things that we need to look at across our district to ensure the health and safety as we maximize the learning environment for our children. And so just wanted everybody to know what you put in the box was shared with the board, not by name, just shared with the board without name, so that you all saw that. With that, I would like to say we've done a tremendous job, and I think we have, on our efforts for the vaccine. And we do have some things that other districts don't have, so I'll smile as I say that. But on December 9th, the state health department in the governor's office asked us to send out a link if you wanted the vaccine. So on December the 9th, we emailed that to all of our employees. That wasn't just full-time, that was part-time, that was any parapros that we had. With the survey link, fill this out. On December 16th, we sent a reminder with additional guidance that we had found. But the state department, or the state health department, told us we had to have that done by December 18th and in. Now, I've talked with some teachers about this. That's probably not the maximum time you're getting out of the first semester of going to school in a pandemic. I don't know that that was the ideal time to be asking employees in a school district. And we recognize that if they wanted the vaccine. And so even though we had those answers and that was the cutoff date, these next steps to me were, I think, very beneficial. On January 13th, so after we get back from Christmas break, this was right after school on a Wednesday so that everybody could make it. Both Dr. Fleener Ford, who's Dr. Laboon's partner, and Dr. Laboon held a virtual discussion. We walked through the vaccine effort. They did a virtual discussion and did question and answers with our faculty and staff. We archived that to ensure that if anybody had to miss that, they were eligible to watch that afterwards and ask questions. I got a lot of positive comments back on that. That afternoon, too, we also emailed a second survey for the vaccine. This was the one that they're supposed to have signed up by December 18th. Basically saying we have a will call list. If we have vaccines, because we learned they'll ship us vaccines and they're going to get them in an arm that day. So if you have vaccines left over, and you now have changed your mind, let us know and we'll get you on. We can't promise you the vaccine, but we'll do everything we can possibly do. So we call that the will call list. We sent another one out on January 25th, just to say if you've thought about it, you want to change your mind, we'll get you on the list. And then and what was happening at that point, let me say that, was we had a few employees that had already gotten a vaccine in another area, or they might have been quarantined and couldn't get the vaccine, or they might have still been in their 90-day threshold since COVID, and they thought it would be better to get it after the 90 days after they finished getting COVID. And so we were able to get a vaccine to everybody that wanted it that day, correct, Mr. Brock? Would like to stop and thank the pharmacy at Western Baptist and also Western Baptist Hospital for their efforts with that. Tremendous help as we went through that. Then this week, that was the first vaccine, which was the 27th. This week, on February 22nd, we had an opportunity to get in another window for the first dose. And so an email was sent out on Monday to our employees across the district saying if you weren't able to get the vaccine the first time and you still want it, let us know. We worked this out to get to this point. We had 39 employees that signed up for that within 2 days. By Tuesday, on February 24th, which was yesterday, we had the second dose of vaccine in roughly 250 employees that are full-time in our district. And then we started the first dose with the second window, and I think we got 9 administered. We had 9 left over, and so those phone calls were made. And so with that, we've gone very consistent, asking if you want this. If you've changed your mind, you've had different thoughts, try to get you as much information as you possibly can. So we wanted to ensure our employees' health and safety by giving them access to the vaccine. Here's our employee data on the vaccine, and I will tell you overall, this is a minimum, because we know we had employees that had already had the vaccine on January 27th. And so when you look at our 460 full-time employees, which this doesn't count our parapros and some other subs we were made it available to, et cetera, that are working with our kids, but just our full-time employees that are here every day, we're at least a 61% rate that have been vaccinated one time, if not most of that is 2. And we have a few that are on the waiting list that we anticipate will be done either tomorrow or middle of next week. And that waiting list of full-time employees, I think we're down to 5. Everybody else is a parapro coach or a substitute. So I think we're down to very few on the waiting list. It's we got I put this together Wednesday morning, and we got shots Wednesday afternoon. So we have a high number of our employees that have been vaccinated with that. And so when you start looking and thinking through what do we need to do for children, what's the educational process look like, I think we're in the conversation of the positive aspects for children, giving our local and state rates, giving our mitigation efforts that we've been doing since the beginning of school to ensure the health and safety of everybody. I think you've got to weigh the risk of being back now that we've had the vaccine versus what are the positive aspects to children in school. Not that this is all encompassing, but we know there's an impact on learning loss due to the pandemic. And we, March 13 last year, we didn't see children for a while. We've had a 8-week, I believe, window in November, December that we didn't see children. We've been 2 days, we've been 4 days. And so we've had a lot of virtual kids throughout that time. And so there are children we've not seen since March 13th, 2020 from a teaching standpoint. Obviously, in-person instruction is development appropriate, especially for our younger children. Getting children in our buildings and working with them, our teachers more accurately understand each and every child's learning needs. And we're planning for what that extended school year looks like. We're also planning what extended day opportunities look like going forward. And so it will not just be come to school at the normal time, leave school at the normal time. The conversation on acceleration has been on what's it look like when you extend the school year, what's it look like when you extend the school day, what's it look like in your core subject, what does it look like in your elective subject, and also what's it look like as we partner with community organizations that have the same goal with our children that we do to ensure their success. We know, and not to debate this much, but I think this is well believed, there's mental, emotional, even social well-being of children that have not been at school. There's lots of research out there on that. We know the school environment provides a very structured learning environment for more than, if we 2 days, 3 days, 3 days is better than 2, 4 is better than 3, 5 is better than 4. So there's a structured learning environment. It's additional instructional support for children, more days a week through their access to teachers. And so I am a parent with children at home that are learning virtually. And so there's lots of math tutoring that happens. And I think we can all say that that's going on, but you actually have access to the middle school, high school, or elementary math teacher to that. We also see the consistent access to our support services for our children, which is our counseling, our nutrition, our health care, our friskies, the transitional services, the student services, even our after-school tutoring. That becomes more consistent if kids are in the building. And honestly, I think it definitely lessens the stress on parents and guardians due to the pandemic, which is child learning, work schedules, etc. And I think as we stand here and think about what we need to do, these are the benefits. There is inherent risk associated with going anywhere outside your house in a pandemic. And so that's where I think we need to look at least wanted to share with you all our local community data, what those trends have looked like, not only for the 100,000 that we see on the map every day through Frankfurt, but also what we chart and discuss each week as we look at our data that you don't see out there in the community. And so with that, if we bring more kids back, and right now we've got Blue and we got Tornado, so if those combine, I wanted to assure everybody, and this is up here, that since August, and this is our Kentucky Healthy at School Guidelines, and I've been asked this question a bunch, of why do other districts maybe have more kids going than we do? And so the second bullet there says to have 6 feet between children. And we have stayed at 6 feet between children without trying to ensure, any mitigation of that. But the next bullet, actually, since we started school, does say if the physical space in the school does not allow for spacing students 6 feet, space desk as far away as possible. Now, I think that has to somewhat be looked at times and at places if we have combined groups, that we have to rethink how we do some things at times. And so if children can learn at home virtually, I'm not so sure that they can't learn in the classroom beside you or the classroom across the hall and still have access to the teacher. That obviously would involve instructional assistants and other school personnel to have that way. I think that we have to think through very thoughtfully how we eat, because we're going to have to take our mask down when we eat, and we've got to maintain 6 feet there. And the goal for me, if this is the board's wishes, will be how do we maximize the amount of space between every child we possibly can, with the idea we want to be 6, but if we might not be 6, and I want our community to know that. And so there are concerns that you've read throughout what I read relative to our employees of what about the 6 foot. Now, we have been very strict on that. Other districts haven't always been very strict on that. And so hopefully you all see that as we've been trying to ensure the health and safety of our children and our employees. And the other side of that, I would like to think, is what's changed, at least for me, is we have had, and I walked you through, access to a vaccination. And now that we have a second round of that, we're in a 7 to 10, 11, 12-day window, 15, that we do have that at our disposal. And we will continue to work to get a vaccine for any employee that asks for a vaccine going forward, because that's the right thing to do. A couple of thoughts, if we adjust the school calendar, that I wanted you to think through. And I will point to 2 dates. March 12th, which is coming up, is actually, here it's blue, that's February, sorry, March 12th. That is a no school day. That's a Friday. If you look at April 2nd, we're in session all the way again up to April 2nd. And that is here right before spring break. That is a scheduled NTI day. And I will tell you as superintendent, and I will tell you as a father, that's our tornado groups. That's the Thursday, Friday. And they have missed more time based on what's been going on. They're missing today and tomorrow based on our vaccination schedule. Sir?
Did you say March 12th or February 12th?
I'm sorry. I think I pointed first to February 12th, but it's March 12th. Right? Yes. March 12th is a scheduled no school day. April 2nd is a scheduled NTI day. In the surveys, we had some teachers and other employees ask us to maybe reconsider the virtual day not being on Wednesday. And so, as I said in the third bullet, we missed a lot of Thursday, Fridays. So that group of children have missed a lot. I would suggest that if we do adjust the calendar, that we strongly look at March 12th and April 2nd to be instructional days. And that would, one of those is a non-contract day for our teachers, 187-day employees. The other is actually a contract day. That would turn it into a contract day. And so what we would have to do is take 1 day off the end of the school year based on contract law. So instead of getting out on Thursday, March 20th for children, we get out a day sooner on Wednesday, March 19th. And so I think the way our high school does finals, they do those every 3 days. That would be fine. Graduation scheduled for the 20th. That shouldn't be a challenge there. But if that adjustment did happen, we would have to take a school day off the end. Mr. Brock would do that for us. And so we can modify the calendar all the way up to June 30th, so we can do that. Now, there is a concern if you have vacation plans. if you have made plans already there. And one of the things I would say, if we look at a 4-day week, is to investigate whether we need to go Monday through Thursday. So we have 4 days back to back to back to back, and then Friday being a NTI day, and each week going forward, and that would alleviate some of the stress, at least on the families that would have plans. I don't know if that's a big group, but that would be that way. But that would be one way to think that. Could potentially leave it like it is, but we've missed a lot of Friday, so I thought, well, those are NTIs that would be helpful with that, especially around the spring break week. So with that, questions, thoughts, discussion, and I hope I walked you all through that slow enough. Very, very excited to have this information to present to you because I think it paints a better picture than we were on February 15th. So I appreciate that process to do it.
Are there questions from the board?
You were talking about what steps are you going to take to bring place to reduce the density?
To reducing the density?
I think Dr. Okoji's question was additional steps that can be taken to help reduce the density as we go back to 4-day-a-week instruction. So basically combining the blue and the tornado
Yes.
4 days a week.
So if we do that, based on the information that I was seeing on Monday from parents and also our faculty and staff, parents were, I would say overwhelmingly, faculty and staff were in favor based on a 50-50 cut. I asked Mr. Brock, to take the rosters of the blue plus the tornado and make sure our principals had those to start looking through if this is a decision that was made, what some of those challenges would be as we go forward. And so with that, there has been an idea from the survey and also talking to teachers and a principal of doing half-day kindergarten, for example. And so we used to do half-day kindergarten, you were an AM or a PM. And so the question I raised as we had that conversation, after I had a chance to think about it after the teacher talked to me, was could we not do full-day kindergarten, but the teacher spent half the day with 14 kids, half the day in the afternoon with the other 14 kids, assign an instructional assistant, do tutoring during the time the teacher's not in there with them, do our Reading Plus program and other activities to continue to grow children during that time, meaning they're at school all day, but we're really focused on them for half a day. So I think there could be potential that way.
By that and through that, I guess you accomplish that by if you had 28 kids, to your example, so
Yes.
14 and 14, you'd have another room. You'd split them 50-50, 14 in one room, 14 in another, to decrease the density. Have an instructional assistant in one room, a teacher in one room, flip-flop them at certain points, so
Yes.
they're getting access to teacher and instructional assistant.
Absolutely, that's one way to do that. We could also, as the teacher's teaching in room 1 with 14 kids, we can stream instruction home, so we can stream instruction across the hall or next door. And I'm not going to say that's ideal, but I think it's better than being at home if you've got an instructional assistant in there with you as you're doing that. And I think you can flip the teacher instructional assistant. I think there's those ways to think through that. I think at Tillman we've got a huge advantage with the Innovation Hub. We've got larger labs, so there's some opportunities. I know Ms. Stieg was looking at some of those, potentially ACTs coming up, so we were having that conversation earlier this week. So what's put stress on the tornado plus the blue, when you add them together, that gets them to large groups like 28 in kindergarten, is we have a dedicated virtual teacher in kindergarten at that school that's focused only on the virtual, so that the two teachers that are in person can focus entirely on in-person students. And so those conversations have to be had and looked at and discussed. I'm not saying anything's changing, because when we made those choices, I asked our principals, as you look at who the virtual teacher is, we have employees that have health issues potentially, or they have somebody at home that they're trying to protect, and so choose wisely. And so you know your people, so let's do that. And so with that, I think it's going to have to be creative as you go through each room. It's not always going to be ideal. I get that. And we'll admit that it won't be ideal in every situation. But ideal to us would be 5 days a week, no pandemic, no mask. We're getting ready for tomorrow with 3,000 children showing up, plus 280 in preschool. Let me pause and say this, though, because I didn't and I meant to, and I apologize. Preschool has not been in the surveys on parent or employee because they're in a federal binding law that we have to follow there. So they're a kind of a unique animal relative to the rest of the district. So,
I would suggest if one, let's say we have 28 in a class, 14 can remain in the class, the other 14 can go to the gym to reduce the density.
yes,
I think the
yeah.
gym can take more than 10 classes, I'm sure, even if they are 6 feet apart.
What they need to make sure of is that there are classrooms that are available first.
That's what
There may not be that many classrooms available. Second, if you're gonna do this, you need to start planning now. Because what I'm looking at is that you anticipate those kids, some of them who are virtual, are gonna be coming back to school, a possibility. Don't wait until the last minute. They need to start planning now.
Yes, sir. And that's why I sent that information to our principals. Actually, Mr. Brock sent that then. So ahead of time, just to say. And I also took the survey results that somebody said they're virtual and they want to come back in the survey results. And again, that's about a little under 50%. But I went ahead and sent that to the principals too, just to say, heads up, I don't know what's happening here, but they're answering it different than what they're doing. So you might need to think through this that way. And so when you look at the classroom space, that does become a challenge that we've had conversations around in one of our elementaries, honestly. And so I don't know that if they keep a dedicated virtual teacher in that elementary, we might not have to either work at a library or have to work at home some of that time. I don't know what that's going to be. Again, I did not say just at home, but it could be somewhere else in the building to free up that space. And so we've got one that is packed that way. The other ones, the other two elementaries have some classrooms. I know we're using some as administrative space. Again, one of those classrooms, again, that's not what we want to do. That's not what best case scenario is. But there are some classrooms that we're using for administrative space that we might have to repurpose differently. So, but we do have one that's very, very tight. Our lab situation at staying 6 foot, and again, I don't think we can guarantee 6 foot. We'll do everything we can do is get 5 foot. If we can't get 5, go to 4 or go to 3. I mean, whatever we got to do as we plan that. Our lab situation at the middle school does get squished a little bit relative to that. So you might have to have some kids learning in another spot for that block and rotate that out. Today's Mondays, this child, Tuesdays the next child. Is that ideal? No, you want them in the classroom. I think that would be better than being at home, personally, but that's just my personal belief.
I also think that, first of all, let me be understood that I do want children in school. But I want us to make sure those risks that exist, that we do all that we can. For instance, let's say you cannot do the 6 feet. You can't even do 2. Do we have a responsibility to let parents know what will be our responsibility as a board?
Mr. Holland, you're our attorney, so I will ask that. In the survey that was sent out to our faculty and staff together and to our parents, we put the language in the survey. If we're 4 days a week, we cannot guarantee 6 feet everywhere. I mean, that was part of what you had to read through to take through the survey. So that was in the survey as an effort to communicate that out on the front end. But do we have any type of responsibility to communicate that your child in second hour Spanish 1 is less than 6 feet?
I don't know of one specifically. It's sort of it's a new test case, I guess is what I'd say. But I think providing information, as much information as possible, so parents can make educated decisions about where the kids are going to be is our goal. Certainly one that we should strive for. I don't think we should just put kids in classrooms without that information to be shared out. Since we're still offering a virtual option, I think just as with every district that is offering virtual options, get the information of how that school is going to be, and then make a determination based on that discussion.
Understand. Yeah, and I think we would. And I know some schools across the Commonwealth, at least I've heard this from the governor's mouth, that they said, for example, you're going to take AP, you got to come. And so that's obviously not what we've done across the district, but it's a great virtual option is what we're offering. So.
Lastly, I'm going to say this. I believe that teachers want kids in the classroom, but I do also feel as if safety, the risks are important to them. And I just want us to make sure that we also keep that not on the back burner, but up front and do what we can to ensure that safety and minimize those risks.
Absolutely, and I think federal law would say that we would have to do that in any situation relative to pre-existing conditions, and we do that consistently. We went through, when we came back 2 days a week, we surveyed our employees about, or got information back from our employees that said they had pre-existing conditions, got letters from our health providers in times, and so we worked with each one of those individually. In the executive order that the governor signed right after, maybe it was right before Christmas, but it came into effect when we came back in January, the exemptions do lift that you would have, and we have employees that have these exemptions. They lift 7 days after the second shot, whether you had the shot or not. It was written for access to the vaccination. And so we followed that way, and I think we could have a few potentially ask that. Now, the majority of, at least from teachers, the majority of requests we had were from our teachers that were virtual already. They were focused solely on virtual students, and they basically, when we sit down with them, like, I can come to work, I just want to stay virtual based on, and then they would have their situation, their letter that way. So we didn't have very many that we had to make accommodations for. But we'll do that to the letter of state executive order or our federal law.
Kind of up the lines of Dr. Hudson's question a little bit, what percentage of our classrooms, just ballpark, it sounds like one elementary school is tighter than the others in terms of numbers, just based on how they're...
Well, yeah, we have about 610 kids enrolled in one elementary school, and we're about 380 in the other two. So yeah, there's that issue.
If you look at our classrooms, what percent of our classrooms at the capacity of combining the Blue and Tornado group would struggle to be, I know not all of them can be 6 feet in those situations, but let's say 4 feet, can we accommodate greater than 4 feet in virtually all our classrooms? Kind of how, do you have some sense as to what percentage of our classrooms are going to be tight? We have to really work to get something to not be tighter than 4 to 6 feet.
What I know is what our principals have told me at this point, and so I asked them to start looking at that, and so I've communicated out, obviously, a kindergarten issue that I think is in one building. I've gotten some positive aspects back from another, but I couldn't tell you an exact, here's the issue. Now, again, the goal would be to maximize space as we can. Now, there's not every classroom can't turn into 2. We know that. And so, in talking to the principals, there are some areas that we're going to have to sit and think through and look at uniquely and differently. Mr. Black, have you gotten any sense of anything different?
I think it really depends on the combination of the classroom. Some of our classrooms are older. Some of those older classrooms, from some of the elementaries are a little bit smaller. But then again, it all depends on how many kids are enrolled in that class. So, like, for instance, at Tillman, you might have a language class that's a little tighter, or an AP class that's a little tighter with more kids in it. But there are some options, like Dr. Charlotte was saying, for moving those classes. For instance, back in the fall, pre-AP biology met in this room, and it was because that room was, back then, even then, it was a little too full. So once they moved in here, there was plenty of room for each child. So, and go ahead, Sally.
I guess I have a question, maybe it's for you, Dr. Laboon, but it seems like things have changed and keep changing. But I thought originally that if you couldn't social distance, you needed to wear a mask. Has that changed?
We will be wearing a mask. Originally, back in the summer, I think maybe in late May, early June, it was we planned that because, all right, we're gonna be 6 foot because we didn't think our children would be able to wear, especially younger ones, would be able to handle and accommodate a mask all day. And they have blown us away with meeting our expectations. It's not an issue. I got a lot of questions over the summer. What are you gonna do if the kid doesn't wear a mask? Oh, we'll work through it. It's not gonna be a problem. They're not gonna get in trouble. And so early in the summer, we planned on that, and then maybe late July, the CDC changed it to 6 foot and a mask.
Okay.
It got to be where, at first it was 6 feet. If you had a mask on, if you were less than 6 feet, then you were okay up to a certain point. But then they quarantined you at, like
Yeah.
you, Dr. Shaw was saying, 6 feet with a mask. If you were less than 6 feet with a mask or less than 6 feet without a mask, it didn't matter. You still got quarantined.
And it happened
Okay.
as we were planning
It's
for.
just hard to keep track of it because
It
it
is.
has changed quite
We
a bit.
had a pretty extensive plan for back to school that we had to completely change when they changed that. So that'd have been late July, early August.
Yeah.
But our plan, I mean, going back, is not just you're masking if you're moving, it's masking
All day.
all day, every day.
And that was a governor, I believe, wasn't that a governor? That was a state health department guideline, maybe CDC too, of wearing masks all the time in school. There's no breaks for masks.
Unless you're taking a drink or eating.
Yeah, and that, again, that was a change from the beginning.
Just one point of clarity.
Sure.
I'm looking at the employee vaccine data where it says, no, these teachers that's not going to get it or have not had it yet.
They have not, let me make sure I'm looking at what you're looking at. That means they have not emailed us and told us they want to take the vaccine. With one caveat, there are a few, because they communicated that to us, that already had the vaccine before we did it January 27th. So I don't know how many that is, and we don't have a good record of that. So that doesn't mean they won't, as we did this week on Monday. Hey, we've got access to more vaccine. Who wants it? We had 39 by Tuesday afternoon. We got, I believe, 9 shots in arms yesterday, Troy. Additional 9. We're going to continue. They're going to schedule that through Baptist as we go through this next week and tomorrow. And then we'll keep asking. And so our goal is anybody that wants a vaccine, even if it takes a while to get there, to get you access to a vaccine. And so they have also, we are prioritized, I believe, as a 1B as education, K-12 educators. And so that hasn't changed. So we're still have been a priority if we have people that want the vaccine.
To answer your question.
Yeah, someone.
Was your question,
No, he answered the
Yeah.
question, but I'm thinking beyond that. Never mind. I'm good.
During this time, will this food service still be working? And how do you intend to reduce the density in the dining?
Dr. Koji was asking during this time, I think, will food service still be in operation, and how are we going to address decreasing density during mealtime?
Yeah, that's, we did that with a high density in our buildings by eating in our classrooms in the fall. And so it's one way that we've done that. Also, how do we started out there. That does take a lot of, time from some of our instructional assistants to do that. And I'm thinking specifically at Tillman as we ate through classrooms. And so we got more streamlined with that as we went. We were able to combine into the cafeteria, all face one way, be 6 foot apart. So cafeteria and the blue room, it'll probably be 3 or 4 lunch runs, and maybe some still eating in their classrooms is how they would handle that. So, but we've been doing grab and go breakfast, which made for several years now, which got our activity of our students eating breakfast, our rates went up as far as interacting and eating for us. And so we've had to do some of that so we take the food to the class, it's warm, it's in warmers, kids get it, and then we roll trash cans around and take out the food at the end of the lunch period.
As you're working with the principals and the teachers moving forward, you guys will be looking at these I guess you've got the combined rosters to everybody, and you're in the process of working with the principals on how to problem solve some of that. If teachers have, or administrators have particular concerns about particular areas or a particular situation or circumstance, what is their route to bring that to your all's attention to sort of, again, now knowing that we can't maybe solve every problem, but just risk
Right.
mitigate that specific
I think
situation?
first and foremost, work with their building level principal or supervisor, and then if we're not getting anywhere, if they feel like that they're not being heard, to reach out to me or Mr. Black relative to that. We anticipate meeting with our principals soon to talk about what are those areas, and let's get it scheduled relatively early next week, even if we have to do it over the weekend, to talk through, at least to start the thinking process of where are you seeing an issue that you can't solve. I've already had some of those conversations with one principal. Think about it this way, and they're like, yeah, I think that could work. And then I had a phone call from another principal that says, hey, I think we've got it all figured out. So now we'll go through that again thoroughly to make sure we're doing everything we can to maximize. And then obviously we would want to be vigilant about being out in the buildings and seeing what we see, and relative to, you put a plan in place, that doesn't always mean you can't improve the plan. And obviously we're always focused on continuous improvement, so we would want to make sure we're seeing lunch happen. We're wanting to make sure we see drop-off happen. We want to make sure we see kids getting off buses. Those are areas that sometimes you get bundled up. And then, looking at our classes throughout the day. Ask our principals to be doing that thoroughly too, going forward. But, sorry.
Are there any other questions from the board or comments from the board?
Do we need to discuss the school calendar days now, or is that something later? I'm in full favor of making March 12th and April 2nd in-person days for sure, unless we change that to the virtual day. But I definitely think that needs to happen.
Well, and the issue with the calendar in my mind is we put this together in August, maybe early August, Mr. Brock, with what we were anticipating for the year, and it's constantly changing.
Right.
I don't know how we could hit a snow week any better than being out last week. So I wish we could have, we've got a lot of calls asking us how in the world did y'all do that. But with that, if families have things planned and that's a school day, there are educational enhancement opportunities. That is a way for parents to have their child counted present as they are getting an educational experience if they're traveling, for example, or working something in the community, so that we can work with them. Principals know that, so they can work with them on that. If we have any employees that have some type of issue with the March 12th date and maybe even the April 2nd date, I would want to sit down and see what could be the issue there, and then deal with that as very specific to each individual situation.
So I think, just to clarify her question a little bit for me, is it best from the educational side of it, or calendar side of it, if we go back 4 days a week to go Monday through Thursday? Or is it best for us to go back Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday with everybody, and then change those 2 days to in-person instructions?
Right, and my difficult way I guess my long way to not really answer that is, there was evidence that you saw this in the survey data, that having it on Monday or Friday made sense to certain employees, so you had some continuation of instruction over a 4-day period. I don't know what childcare looks like for kindergarten, first grade, etc. So that would be I would be guessing on that. And I know our parents have had to work hard to get childcare, so that could be something we ask, a quick survey of elementary families and our elementary teachers, middle school, high school teachers and employees, what makes sense. That way we could get that out tomorrow and have that, I think, a good response rate by Tuesday next week, if that's something we needed to look at, which day would be the NTI day each week. And as you saw this, and I don't want to not let people know that we read through this, there is a conversation, at least within the parent survey data, of what I noticed as elementary school is, why aren't we doing 5 days a week? And so just want to make sure I bring that up. That was something I saw throughout there.
Is that something we could maybe not start with, but look into after we go a few weeks to school and get the teachers' feedback as far as what they think?
That's the way I would, if we are thinking that way, that's the way I would recommend doing it. Based on, we've surveyed on 4-day weeks, not 5-day weeks, and so that might be different information, but that would be easy to ask that again, is could we move to a 5-day week elementary-wise? I don't know how we're going to teach some of the, and we have, at least from the survey results, we've got about 76% that are in favor of 4-day weeks at the high school, and where you start getting into very specific classes, I know we have teachers that have 5 preps, 6 preps, that are, high level, advanced placement classes and, engineering, et cetera. I don't know how we would do 5 days at middle and high without burning our teachers out. We started that way at the elementary, and I think our teachers were getting overwhelmed and working all night to try to catch up with virtual. 2 of the buildings dedicated teachers to be the virtual teacher to take that load off, and every grade but 1 to lessen some of that and to give the attention to the virtual kids that need, that needed virtual attention every day and that access to help. Another elementary chose to do a lot of live teaching in their classes, and so they have 1 virtual teacher in 1 grade level between K through 5, and so I think it'll just be conversations about what's best. I did ask that to the principal, and so it was. I think we could try to figure that out if that's what the will of the board and that's the what our families and our employees think's best. So I think some of our employees are been wondering if you're going 4, why aren't you going 5? And like I said, that's every employee, but there's at least a handful is the way I would say that. At least have expressed that to administrators in their building that have shared that to me in the last day or so.
Other questions or comments from the board?
Can I say one last thing?
Sure.
I know our employees want to work with children, without a shadow of a doubt. That's there's no, we just want, no one is not wanting to work with children to ensure their success. And I don't want any survey data to look like it's like, no, I don't want children. Because there is this, at least nationwide issue between that, and I want to make sure that our families and our employees of Paducah Public Schools know that that's not what's happening here. It's just, there's some risk tolerance differences as you work through the community.
I'll just make a couple of quick comments maybe before and see if the board has any, if there are any board members want to make a motion regarding some of what we've been discussing. But I think I certainly recognize, I think the board members recognize that the teachers want kids back in school. I think we also recognize that there's legitimate fears from both parents, teachers, and students. A lot of people have been impacted by COVID directly with family members who've been ill, and I think those fears are real and justified. I think on the safety side of it, I'm really encouraged by the fact that at least 60% plus of our employees have been vaccinated. The vaccine is 95% plus effective. I think that's a good factor. You hear herd immunity, which is where if enough people have been vaccinated, then everybody's protected. So at least amongst the teachers in that population, we're in a situation where they have some protection from their interactions and their exposures to each other. There have been students, there have been some teachers, although not vaccinated, have had COVID and have recovered. So they're kind of contributing to the fact that even if we're more dense in a classroom, some of those people have already had it, so we're a little bit less dense because they're not people who are going to be a part of the transmission chain. So even though we don't really know those numbers for sure, that does give us a little bit of, of security, knowing that there's a portion of those that are already protected even if they haven't been vaccinated because they've had COVID and recovered. In terms of our numbers, just as I look at it as a physician, our new cases per 100,000 population back in December, October, November, being in the 60s, and that number now down to 10.5, which is the lowest level of the orange category before we get to yellow, which I think everybody should be very comfortable with yellow and also with green. We're at a very good level on all three of those parameters, new cases per 100,000, our active cases in this region, and the percent positivity of our test rate. So I think all those things are very, very favorable, and I think we should have some security in those numbers, and we're watching those numbers every week to make sure that those trends don't go back in the wrong direction. Having said all that, though, I totally recognize the fear, and there's nothing that we can do, I don't think, to completely mitigate risk or completely mitigate that fear, and I think it's very important that we have a mechanism to listen to people's concerns moving forward, and we just try and exhaust every possibility we can to correct that issue or to fix that problem or to make that as safe as possible. I also think it's good that we have a track record that our students have demonstrated abilities to wear masks the entire time they're in school, which that was unknown for us, back at the beginning. So I think our track record with students sounds like it's been pretty favorable in terms of their, adherence with that. So I think, going back, if we make things more dense, that masking procedure and protocol and appropriate use of masks needs to be emphasized, and that's probably something that's going to have to happen on an ongoing basis. So just make sure that we're really attuned to taking input from the front lines as to how we can continue to make the situation as safe and as for everybody as possible. Are there other questions or comments from the board, or is there any motion from the board regarding the information that's been discussed?
I'll be glad to make a motion. I make a motion to send kids back to school starting March 8th to a 4-day week, and then we will survey to see what our virtual school day will be. But we'll also for sure make the 12th and the 2nd in-person days based on the schedule.
So your motion is to allow the district, starting March 8th, to have in-person instruction for students 4 days a week, maintaining a virtual option for anybody who wants to continue to remain virtual. We're going to amend the school calendar to make March 12th and April 2nd instructional days.
March 12th instructional day, April 2nd a non-NTI day. And
Okay.
what I would ask is if Friday ends up being the day, those are both Fridays that NTI needs to happen on a 4-day week, they'll go to NTI days.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
We could clean that up in
March
the
12th
next one.
instructional, April 2nd NTI, and then we're going to non-NTI. And then we're going to I gotcha. And then we're going to then survey parents and faculty both as to if we're in school, in-person instruction 4 days a week, which of those days would remain a virtual day, which weekday is best suited to remain a virtual day. Is that what?
Exactly.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Are there any questions or clarification or discussion from the board regarding that motion? If there's not, any other comments from the superintendent or anybody else? Dr. Okoji?
Yes. Did I understand that there will still be some students taking virtual lectures?
I think Dr. Okoji's question was, did he understand there would still be some students attending virtually?
Yes.
Yes, sir, that option will not go away, nor is it legal for us to take that option away based on the executive order by the governor. So that has to be part of what we do this school year.
Who decides, the parents or the
That communication's always come to us from the parents. I'm not gonna say some children don't try to weigh in on that, but that's always been communicated to us by the parents.
I think it stands right now, roughly about 20% of our students, roughly, are choosing to remain virtual.
I think it's probably a little closer.
Excuse
Say
me?
again?
Based on that survey, yes.
Yes, based on the survey, what we're seeing with about 46% response rate, what we're seeing right now, I think we're closer to 26% or so right now, virtual versus in person for the hybrid schedule. Is that about right, Joy? Okay.
One last question. If a student is on virtual and he's not doing very well, what do you do?
Great question.
It's a great question. What we have
So
done.
the question was, I don't know if anybody, if the audience could hear,
Okay.
but the question was if a child is on virtual only right now and is having trouble performing the way the teacher, student, family would like him to perform, what do we do? Or what can we do? Or what do we do?
Gotcha. Well, there is no mechanism we have to take that away from the child. What we have been trying to do is be proactive by visits from principals, assistant principals, Frisky, social workers, teachers, phone calls. We have, at least back in the fall, when we didn't have a lot of engagement from virtual children, we started looking at where those students were on our map of Paducah. And we worked with partners starting after fall break to create virtual tutoring centers each day a week throughout the community. And so it was within walking distance of a lot of the virtual children. Since then, we did hit a time frame where we couldn't have contact with children in the fall. And so elementary-wise for sure, has worked hard since Christmas with the Girls and Boys Club and I think we're busing children that are virtual to the Girls and Boys Club to get tutoring each day from the different schools. I don't have that schedule memorized.
2 days a week.
2 days a week per school to get tutoring for our virtual children that's available for us. So that's Clark, McNabb, and Morgan that have that. Morgan at times will go get virtual kids on a bus. Dr. Finsky has a CDL, and so he keeps a bus there and goes picks them up and brings them in to tutoring sessions. We also have after-school tutoring sessions at Clark throughout the week, and then middle school, high school, and the elementary schools have all been using the NTI day for tutoring for students that are virtual and that are not virtual.
And middle and high school, they actually bring in virtual students, quite a few, 45 to 50 at Tillman every week for in-person tutoring in a way that the parents are comfortable with. In other words, very socially distant, and very, no movement around the building, so they're, but middle school as well has done some tutoring in the same fashion after Christmas where they're bringing in virtual kids on Wednesday.
Okay, in other words, you as the teacher or the administrator cannot mandate the students to attend the in-class.
Only if the parent agrees. Like, so what we've done is we've worked with each parent, each family individually to problem solve around those, whatever the kid is struggling with. And so for some kids, they, once the school contacts the parents and we worked out a system, we were able to get the kid on track even though they were at home and virtual. But for some, the parents agreed that it would be better if the child would come into school for 1 or 2 days, come to a safe space so there's a structure for their learning.
Okay.
And at the elementary level, that we accomplished that in partnership with the Boys and Girls Club. And that has been really helpful because we were able to leverage their resources to get more virtual kids in, so that, again, we could serve more kids in a way that the parents are comfortable with. But in the end, it really is the parent call on that. We cannot force a child to come in during the pandemic.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so there's a motion to allow a return to 4 days a week of in-person instruction for the families, the students that choose to do that, beginning on March 8th with some adjustments to the school calendar that we've already talked about. There's a motion and a second. If there's no other questions or comments from the board, Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Dr. Koji?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. Levine?
Yes. Are there any other items on our agenda for this evening? If not, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
I so move.
Motion from Dr. Okoji. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Howard. No questions from the board. Call the roll, please.
Dr. Okoji?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. Levine?
Yes. Thank you.